Hey everybody, welcome back to Men Need to Be Heard. It's Dan, and I got a rockin' show for you today. So when I first started doing this podcast, almost a year ago now, I had made a list of people that I wanted to have on. And I actually had two lists. I had experts, and then I had people that I followed on various social medias that I just thought were awesome. And I've been saving this one. You know, it's like you want to save the best for last, even though this isn't going to be the last. I've been saving this one for just the right moment. And you know what? It's the right moment. So I am going to bring on someone I consider to be a friend, someone I have followed for 3.5 years, somewhere in that area now. And she's amazing. So let me bring her on. Her name is Tammy, but really she goes by the Manicured Mom. And I have to tell you, Tammy, you don't know this, but my first ex-wife's name was Tammy. I won't hold it against you.
I can't help it. It was my dad's favorite song in the 50s. And so
Really?
therefore, yeah,
That's what my
there was
ex
a
was
song
named
called
after.
Tammy
Oh, no.
from 1954, and it was his favorite song. And so therefore, my mother was not given a choice into my name.
That my ex was named Tammy because of that song also. I'm dying here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's a good thing you're not a blonde, otherwise we couldn't be friends. Um,
I am a natural blonde.
well, oh well. So anyway, so Tammy is known, as I said, as the Manicured Mom. She's got some other monikers, I guess we'll go with, and we'll get into all that. But before we jump in, Tammy, why don't you go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, who you are, and what it is you do?
So, my name's Tammy. I am the manicured mom, and I advocate for men and have advocated for men for quite some time, very publicly and very loudly, both on social media as well as in my own personal life in multiple nonprofit organizations. And I kind of just fell into this space. I realized that there were some issues. And one day I made a TikTok video about something I experienced personally and really did not realize quite how much the issues were running through so many men and how many struggles men were having. And it's just kind of become the story of my life for the last 3 years.
It was like basically a full-time job for you at one point, right? I mean, I don't think there
It
was a,
kind of still
it still is. Okay. Yeah.
it kind of still is. I mean, I work, but I probably dedicate, um, I'm probably a good 30 to 40 hours into stuff that I do within the social media space, off the app, and multiple nonprofit organizations and small organizations that I work with in my local area.
Yeah, so you're much like me then, very similar, which is why we get along so well. It's one of the things, and we're going to start diving into some of this, but one of the things that I admire most about you is that you're blunt and honest about things, right? I think it's fair to say, and some will disagree with me, I'm sure, but you're probably middle of the road on things. You know, you call
Yeah.
things out, but you also will, call things out the other way. Or if someone points something out to you and you go, oh, wait a minute, you'll be very upfront about that and say, you know what,
Yep.
maybe I wasn't right or wrong. And I value that. It's
Mhm.
something I think adds to your credibility, of course, but it just speaks to you as a person. How's that experience been with you though? As like you said, you got into it, started going, oh wow. How have you kind of changed with all that? What do you see?
So I think honestly, a lot of people when they first get into this, they kind of go like in the full bore. And I kind of realized that my account was becoming so one-sided and so pro men and almost becoming an anti-woman space. And I had to pull myself back and I kind of had to self-correct
Hmm.
because in doing so, I realized that I was inviting a very seedy subset, which we all know exists within men, of these misogynistic men into my space. And it was becoming an unsafe space for women. And as a woman, I don't want my space to be unsafe for women because that makes it unsafe for me.
Hmm.
And that breaks down the ability for men and women to communicate. And at the end of the day, we can't solve men's issues without women, and we can't solve women's issues without men.
I got to clip that out, save it, and bronze it and put it on a shirt because I couldn't agree with you more on that. Because and I struggle with the same things, right? It's yeah, I want to have some fun occasionally. I want to poke the bear a little bit and raise awareness, but there is that other side of things. There are crazies on both sides.
Yeah.
Whether you want to talk politics, men versus whatever. There's crazies, and trying to keep them in check is very difficult. And
Hmm.
unfortunately, for creators like yourself and myself, we can't watch everything. We do our best,
Yep.
and sometimes things slip through. And that's why I admire you, because I think you do a better job at it than I do, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
It's so hard for me sometimes, because it's not that I don't want to stop them from doing it. I just don't have the time. I get, and
Yeah.
I'm sure you deal with this too. On any given day, I get hundreds of DMs, hundreds of them on the
Hmm.
various social medias, and there's just no way I can keep up on it, let alone the likes, the comments. But it's also mentally taxing. And,
It is.
one of the things I wanted to kind of talk to you about with that is, how do you approach that? Because, for the most part, I'm a laid back guy. I don't let things bother me. But those times percolate up, and it gets mentally taxing. Speaking on behalf of men, we know we're going to get attacked. We know that. That's a
Yeah.
given. How do you deal with that? For me, it's a daily thing. I got to believe it's the same for you. What's your mindset with all that, and how do you deal with it?
It absolutely is. And one of the things that I wasn't prepared for when I came into this space was I was prepared for women to not like what I said and women to be angry with what I was saying. I wasn't prepared for the level of hate that they'll give and their willingness to just throw another woman under the bus. But I also wasn't prepared for the number of men that do not trust women and don't want a woman even speaking on men's issues, that send hate my way.
Hmm.
But what I've learned is that I can't control whether or not somebody agrees or disagrees with me. And if somebody just wants to hate on me, I am the strongest person with the block button for the protection of my own mental health. But I've also realized that there are definite needed times to take mental health breaks. And sometimes I'll take it for a week, but usually at least once every 5 to 7 days, I take a full 24 hours off where I don't make a, I mean, you may still be seeing content up because it was pre recorded, but I don't make a video. I don't respond to DMs. I don't do any of that. And I don't respond to every DM. I go through those DMs and do a quick like proofread of them.
Hmm.
And I look for men that I would consider a red flag for unaliving themselves. And they're the ones that get my attention. And the rest of them, if I get time, I respond back. But a lot of them will just sit there with no response because somebody physically can't respond to all of it.
Yeah.
And so I mean, I kind of take it as I do what I can do.
Mhm.
And if I can't, I don't feel guilty about that because I am one human being.
Yeah, it's interesting that word you just used, guilty. I see. I do feel guilty that I can't do what you're doing. I can't.
Mm.
I know I miss things in my DMs. I always tell people, if you really need to reach me, email me, and people
Mm-hmm.
respect that for whatever reason. I have to give credit where credit's due on that. But it's just interesting, and the reason I wanted to talk about it is so that the audience gets an idea of what it is that we go through, but also hearing it from a woman and a man, because
Mm-hmm.
it's the same for both of us. And that's something I think a lot of people aren't understanding is, and I've said this before, we are more alike than we are different. And you illustrate that a lot with your content and the things that you
Mm-hmm.
talk about. I want to take a step back though. We talked about how you got into it. Was there one particular thing though that kind of got you really going, or was there an event or person, something like that, that said, you know what, I'm going to really jump into this, or was it just it kind of fell into it?
I know it really was. I mean, I made my initial video because I was on TikTok and I was really like I was kind of talking about my life as like a single woman post divorce, recovering from that, getting back out in the dating scene. And my first initial video was kind of like, I could have destroyed my ex in family court and they almost gave me the ability to do that. But what I'm realizing in dating is all of these men that were once good men are so broken because they were destroyed by family court.
Hmm.
And I didn't realize how many men that would speak to. And then it just became a respond to the comments and this. And before you knew it, I was pigeonholed into this kind of men's rights, men's advocate space without the intention. But I also realized in that for the first time in a really long time, I felt like I had a purpose. Like I felt like there was something that was driving me to do this. And every time I would get one of these men that would come to me with this horrific story, all I could do was look at my little boy and go, God, this is going to be his life. And I had my son late in life. I mean, I had him when I was 30, almost 39 years old. So when he's experiencing these things, his mom might not be there to support him. So I, like, in my heart of hearts, knew that I needed to put myself in a position to at least say to him one day when he came to me and said, "Why is this happening?" I could at least say, "You know what? Your mom did everything in her power to try to change this. And I see you and I hear you, and I'm sorry this is happening."
You brought up a really good point there, Tammy, which is you're doing it primarily for your son, right?
Mhm.
It's something that most, I think it's fair to say, most of the women who are in the space or talking about men's issues are coming at it. Usually it's from one of two things. They're either second wives or they're moms of boys. And
Yep.
it's interesting, though, to me, how that dynamic plays when you see it with women who are either have never been married or have good marriages or don't have boys. And I'm going to be blunt, the venom that they will direct at you. And I want to be honest, I think it's a very small subset. And I've talked
Hmm.
about this before, and it's one of the reasons I want to talk to you about it, is I put it at 10, maybe 15% at most. It might
Yeah.
even be less than that. But yet, they are the vocal minority and they are driving the narrative.
Yeah.
As you've tried to bring about the opposite view, if you will, or however you want to phrase
Mhm.
it, how's been that reaction from them? And has anything like really shocked you? Like, I don't mean like somebody attacking you or anything like that, but just in general, like for me, I'll give you my example is, you talk about men's issues or excuse me, boys' issues in school.
Mhm.
To me, there should be no controversy on that. Don't
Yeah.
we want boys to succeed in school? But yet they get apoplectic when you talk about it. Do you have a sense of that also, or some other thing that you kind of go?
Honestly, on a daily basis, I think that there's something that goes, did you just say that? Because I am just baffled that people can't people cannot separate the top 6% of our society that are these, for the most part, rich white men from the rest of the hardworking men that are struggling every day out there in society that that do not have these benefits, that do not have this like get out of jail free card. I am baffled every day when somebody comes in and says, well, they're privileged, because it does not matter how privileged they are. They have disadvantages and they're not sitting in the position that they can fix these disadvantages. And that's why we speak about them. I think that's the biggest thing, is that there's such this kind of rich white guy narrative that he can just buy his way out of everything, put on all men. And so therefore, because they see that as the privileged white man, they then take that situation and put it on everybody else, and it allows them to completely ignore the reality of the situation.
Yeah,
And I'm also always baffled when you speak about the unaliving rates associated with men. And I'm baffled when somebody says, well, if they would just fix themselves. So you're blaming the man. And that is, to me, the lack of compassion. It infuriates me and it breaks my heart all at the same time.
yeah, that's a really good point you brought up. Is that's another area where they will almost, for lack of a better term, dismiss it. Right? It's like, oh, we don't want
Mm-hmm.
to talk about it. It's not an issue. And again, I want people to understand that my viewpoint, much like yours, I'm sure, is that it's a very small minority that's doing that, and yet they're
Mm-hmm.
driving the narrative. And I had Warren Farrell on the podcast a little while ago talking about the boy crisis and how what happens as boys goes into adulthood and ends up with unaliving and things
Mm-hmm.
like that, and how the government doesn't want to deal with it. Um, Society in general doesn't want to deal with it. And I do think you hit on a really good point there. It's that mindset of the top. If you think about what's 500, give or take, billionaires in the United States, somewhere in that
Yeah.
number, right?
It's that top like 2% or 5% or
Ridiculous, something
whatever that
ridiculous.
is.
But even
Yeah.
if you forget today, if you go back 300, 400 years, it was the same scenario, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody thinks that men had it easy 300 years ago. No, they were out in the fields toiling. Yeah, the Lord of the Manor had it easy. That's one guy
Mhm.
where there's thousand, that mindset has carried through just in a different form. My question to you would be like, and I know this is what your goal is, but how do we get more women to not so much to recognize it, because I do think a lot of them do, but be willing to do what you do, be more vocal about it. Because one of the things that I see and I hear from guys, and I bet you do too, is why don't more women speak up for us, and acknowledge what they believe? Why do you think that is?
So I can tell you that when I first started speaking up on this, I almost quit. And if it weren't for my son coming to me one day and asking about why his best buddy could never see his dad and how that wasn't fair, I don't know if I would have stayed talking about what I was talking about, because as I said earlier, as a woman stepping into like kind of the men's advocacy space, I had a plethora of hundreds of women telling me I'm wrong, calling me horrible names, sending me hate, sending me messages on a daily basis, telling me that I should just take my own life and I should jump off a bridge and all of this stuff. But I also had men questioning me and saying that I was a chameleon and that I was just in this for validation. So the hate coming from both directions
Mm-hmm.
almost stopped me. And had my little boy on that given day not come to me with that conversation about it, I don't know if I would have continued. And I think that's where a lot of women don't step up. And I've spoken to a lot of women that support me in my content and say, why do you not make videos if you're such a strong supporter? And they're like, because I can't handle the hate that you get. And they see it happening to people like myself. And so they don't want that. And they see sometimes that dangerous subset that disagrees with you that will come after you and dox you and put your address out, call the cops to your home, things like that. They see that happening to women like myself. They see that happening to women like Roma's Army. They see that, the Dadvocate got doxed on this app because
Mm-hmm.
of her content. And so they would rather be safe than to speak out.
You make those points. I'm I have you on the screen, but I'm nodding my head because that's exactly what I go through. And what men, when I talk with men and try and get them to speak out, they say the exact same thing you just did, right? It's the same
Yep.
scenario. Again, it speaks to we're more alike than we're different. The bottom line is, though, we all need to start speaking up because we are the majority. We want equality. You
Yeah.
want equality, I want equality. I don't want to take anything away from women. You certainly don't want to do that.
Mm-mm.
We're just trying to level the playing field, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term. And addressing issues like men's mental health, unaliving, homelessness, and then the list goes on, family court, all that stuff. I wanted to ask you, because I always like to get this perspective. What do you think are the biggest issues that men and or boys, because you could separate them or keep them together, but what they're facing in today's society? I'm curious to get your opinion on that.
I think that the biggest societal issue today is economically feasible mental health care and a mental health care system that needs to be segregated in how we treat men and women. Because if we addressed that, I believe that we wouldn't just address men's issues in society, we would address women's issues in society. Because not only do men struggle with finding therapists, being able to pay for therapy, all of that, they struggle with a therapy system that was designed by women mostly. I mean, it's an 80% of therapists are women and a large percentage of them are feminists. So designed by women with a feminist mindset in the background that doesn't necessarily listen to the voices of men and how men need to be
Heard.
listened to, how men need to speak. And so if we one looked at how therapy works for men and what's going to better work for men and put a system that was designed for men and one for women, I think they need to be different.
Mm-hmm.
And then two, also made mental health care economically feasible. Because if we look at imprisonment rates in men, we look at the number of men that are in there and then look at the diagnosis of mental health care issues that happen within the prison system. And I believe that at one point in time, I saw a statistic that it was upwards of 70% of the men that are incarcerated for 5 years or longer. And it may not have been 70, but it was somewhere close to that number. Were diagnosed with some form of depression, anxiety, bipolar, one of these,
Mm-hmm.
mental health issues, once they were in the prison system. Now, think if we made that mental health care economically feasible and made it mandatory, like the annual physical, you get a little discount on your insurance if you go in every year and get this free annual physical. Well, if you go in every year and get this free mental health check, and then if they deem that you need treatment, then it's economically feasible, as opposed to what some insurances will cover 2 or 3 sessions and then you're out the door and out of pocket on your own. Most people just can't afford it. We would diagnose these issues before they pushed somebody to commit a crime that they wouldn't have committed if they were being treated.
I find this fascinating, and I want to explore it a little bit, if you don't mind, because I I don't disagree with anything you say. I don't want to, but I go from the biggest issue is fatherlessness and specifically boys' education. Those are the two areas that I go. And,
Yeah.
But it kind of, the reason I'm bringing that up is it dovetails with what you're talking about, right?
Yep.
Because
It falls underneath that.
it does. It starts as little as 3 and 4 and 5 year olds. When you look at the data and the research, you kind of talked about like psychology. I just saw a thing where somewhere in the neighborhood of 90% of the graduates coming out of college are women that are going to go on to be therapists. So under the age of 30, it's like 90% also already. So it speaks to what you're talking about. It's the same scenario with education where you have primarily female focused education right now. And again, I don't want to take anything away from helping the girls and the women through education, but
No.
in doing so, we left the boys behind. In 1970, it was 60-40 men going to college, women, Now it's exactly the reverse.
Yeah.
But I love where you're going with this, and I want to explore it because I think psychology, we all know that mental health right now, illnesses are off the charts. And there's a lot of speculation why that is. But I go to what you're talking about, which is we're not addressing the situation. We're more worried about how it's there instead of going, you know what, we got to help these people. So you kind of started on it. What specifically, like you talk about preventative care and all that, do you have like something in mind? Would you do it in the school system? I'm curious to see what your thoughts are on that.
So I do believe that having some type of system that starts in school and normalizing it in school, because you get a young man that's 20 or 21 or 22 and he's out on his own and he has these troubles, and therapy is not something normal. It's not something he's told to go look for. It's not something he even thinks about. Whereas if you start children on regular mental health checkups on a regular basis, we have higher suicide rates in young boys than we do in young girls. If you start them early and you normalize that becomes their go-to when they have these struggles, and instead of trying to, man up or hold it in or just think it'll pass, they already are set into that go-to. So if we start these conversations with not just boys, but boys and girls when they're young, that therapy is a normal thing, and it is something that every human at some point in time will need and should be okay with going to, then it becomes a comfortable situation. But when you get somebody that hits this life wall at 24 or 25 or 32 that's never had mental health struggles, the concept of therapy, particularly in most men's mind, is so comfortable, and it says to them that they're broken or that they're not okay or that they're crazy. And so therefore they don't reach out to that for fear that somebody will think less of them. And I can tell you from personal experience, when I was dating Dad Bod, he had an appointment one day and he was always very forthright about what he was doing and where he was going. And he was being super weird about, well, I'm going to be out. I'm going to be away for a couple hours. I'm not going to be able to call you, but he didn't want to tell me where he was. And when I finally said, what were you doing that you're being so secretive about? That's weird. It makes me uncomfortable. And he was like, don't think less of me and don't laugh at me. And I'm like, what? He's like, I was in therapy. And I'm like, that's amazing. And he was shocked that I said that. But I'm like, no, that's a really good thing. I'm like, you obviously realize that you have stuff to get through. And he's like, well, yeah. I mean, he's like, I went through a horrible divorce. I'm still kind of going through what happened there. It makes me. And then he said, he's like, and my therapist says I don't really need to keep going, but I feel like it makes me a better man. He's like, to get out my monthly stress somewhere in a safe space where I trust the person, where I can talk it through as opposed to it building up, feels like I'm a better person. But most people don't have that view. So if we started that young in schools where this just became the normal, like you go for your physical, you go for your therapy, that when they finally actually realized that they needed it, it wouldn't be something that they were afraid of. It wouldn't be something that was deemed a negative. And a lot of times it is viewed as such a negative if you are the person that comes forward and goes, well, I'm in therapy. And that people go, well, why? Are you crazy? No, I'm in therapy because I want to make myself better. Like,
Yeah.
not necessarily my brain needs to be healed, but I want to make myself a better human being.
Yeah, I think in a nutshell, what you're saying is breaking down the stigma of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which applies to
Yeah,
both, by the way, both men and women. We both know that.
it
But
absolutely does.
it applies, I think, slightly differently to men. And I'm not trying in any way to dismiss what happens
Mm-mm.
to women, but boys, especially younger boys, are, they're told, suck it up, man up, you know, put a little dirt on it if it's a physical injury, or don't
Mm-hmm.
share your feelings and all that. And I don't think people realize how much that carries through to adulthood. I'm 60 years
Yeah.
old. I still deal with it. And I've
Mm-hmm.
studied this stuff.
Yep.
And there's times I'm like, nope, just suck it up, Dan, right? And that's wrong. And I like your approach, because I think this is what we need to be doing is, one, acknowledging, and a lot of people won't even do that, acknowledge the stigma exists. Some people try and dismiss even that, right? Therapists will do that. I've talked
Mm-hmm.
with therapists and they're like, oh, that's not, wait, you're a therapist and you're telling me that? Come on.
Yeah.
You know, you have a younger son, and I'm sure you talk to other moms who have younger sons. Getting the school system to recognize this is where I want to go with this a little bit. I I'm actually working with Board of Educations right now to kind of get
Mm-hmm.
them more aware of boys' issues. The pushback I get is unbelievable. Like, I've said to them, not necessarily a program what you're talking about, but similar type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Can we have? Well, we can't have that. We have to, it has to be for both. And I'm like, well, you have this program for girls. Why don't you have something for boys? That kind of stuff.
Yep.
As a mom, how do you deal with that? Because one of the things that I wonder, and again, no slight towards anyone, but I don't see the
Mm-hmm.
moms like, where's the what do you call it? Mama bears? Is that what the term is? Why
Yeah.
why aren't they in there like screaming, "My boy matters. I want this pro," because I have never seen it. Maybe it has and I missed it, but I have never seen it.
So outside of my little bubble of the world. I know this is not true, but I am very fortunate to be in a extremely amazing school system where, like, one of the programs that they have, they have Girls on the Run, but they have like a boys after school program too. But one of the programs that they have is what's it? I can't remember. It's like Dad's Day Out or something like that.
Hmm.
They do it once a month on a Friday morning, an hour before school sets. You can either dads can bring their sons in, or if a boy comes from a fatherless home, he can be brought in, and there are a plethora of extra dads that are dads of daughters that come, that is really focused on teaching young boys compassion in our world, talking through issues, talking about things that boys face. Like, that now for the first time, like, my ex-husband goes there, one of their conversations was what to do with the little girls writing you love notes. I mean, because these are third and fourth grade topics that they're talking about,
Right.
and that's a really unique program. But they've done everything from building a birdhouse to talking about things they can do out in the world to be better boys and better men. And so seeing programs like that go across the country would be amazing. And my ex-husband told me he was baffled at the number of fatherless little boys that were brought into the program and that are dropped off, and just somebody is there. Like, either, you as a dad of only one boy brings him onto your team and works with him along
Hmm.
with your son, or there's just a plethora of men that are dads of little girls that show up for it and just to help.
Yeah,
And
that.
programs like that, I think, are really, really needed.
Oh, I wholeheartedly agree. I need more details on that program, because I'm going to bring it to my local board, because that's exactly what
Yeah,
I'm
it was
talking about.
created by a dad in our area.
Hmm. That's exactly what
Hmm.
I'm talking about, Tammy. That's what's needed, right?
Yeah.
It benefits everyone. It doesn't just benefit the dads and the sons. It benefits the daughters. It benefits the wives. It benefits women in general, because
Hmm.
it allows those conversations, if you will. One thing I
Yeah.
think people struggle with understanding is that men, and I've done videos on this, and I'm sure you have, men think completely different than women, and
Yes, they
women,
do.
I don't mean this mean, y'all can't seem to get it that we think differently. It's like, Men are, and this is not a slight towards anyone, men are more logical thinkers. Women are more emotional
Hmm.
thinkers. We go
Yep.
from A to B to C to D, whereas women are what's my feeling on this? And then, okay, we're going to go look at this and all that. And I think and I want to get your opinion on this. I think one of the struggles that boys in particular are facing, but I think men in general in society, is that mindset that's out there that men need to think, or boys need to think like girls, and we're not wired that way.
No. Yeah.
And as a reason I'm asking is, as a mom of a younger boy, how are you dealing with that? And you're fortunate you have your ex in the picture. Sometimes, like you mentioned,
Mhm.
there's a lot of boys that don't have that, and they're the ones that
Yeah.
end up in prison with issues and all that stuff. How are you dealing with that? What are you seeing, even with your son's friends, with all that?
So I think I think I'm leaps ahead of a lot of other women in this space because I spend so much time talking to men and being side by side with men too. Even though I think differently than a man, I think I have a better understanding of how men think. But I'm also smart enough to realize that there are times and place that me as a mother cannot solve my little boy's problems. And I have to call in daddy because this is a man's issue and he's having a man problem. And mommy is not going to be able to solve it. Mommy needs to step back and say, Dad, it's your turn.
Hmm.
It's your time to shine. And I think that that's where a lot of single moms, even if they have a dad in the picture, don't realize that that's okay to step back and say, you know what, this is out of my element. How do I deal with this type of a situation? But I see it. And I also see my son came home from school and said to me, Mom, why is it not okay if I kiss a girl, but it's okay if she kisses me? And I'm like, what? And
Hmm.
he's like, well, a little girl on the playground told me she was going to kiss me. And I told her that I did not want to be kissed because I was too young to date. He's like, because you got to get a job. He's really funny.
That
He's
is
like, you
so
got to get a
cute.
job because he's like, before I can date, I have to have a job because I got to pay for a date. And girls are expensive. Flowers cost a lot of money, mom. Like,
That is
so,
so
so
cool.
yeah, I mean, he very much sees the world and sees what's going on. And he's like, but she told me that she was going to kiss me. And I said, well, then I'm going to kiss you whenever I want. And she said, no, girls are allowed to kiss boys, but boys are not allowed to kiss girls. And I'm like, well, she's lying and she's not allowed to kiss you. And if you don't want her to kiss you and she does, you need to go straight to the principal's office because that is sexual assault.
Hmm.
And I very much have these open conversations with my son about you keep your hands to yourself. You do not touch anybody without permission. This is what consent is. And I'm having them with him at the young age of 10 because they're completely normal to him. And if you raise boys with these things in their mind of being normal, like knowing what consent is, knowing what boundaries are, and knowing how to state your boundaries, they become healthy men that respect themselves and also respect women. But these conversations need to start when they're young. And I have them with his friends when they're here. And probably sometimes too openly that maybe makes some parents uncomfortable, but yet they know that I have good intentions in doing it.
Better that you do it, my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting because I've had similar conversations to your story, right? And with people. And the point I always make is, and you don't have a daughter, but do you have that conversation with your daughter as well? And the majority of the time, it's like, well, no, I don't. And that
Mm-hmm.
speaks to where we are at, because using your son's example, and I've heard this, I can't tell you how many times I've heard where, oh, my son came home and you know the little girl hugged me or whatever, and they're kids,
Yeah.
they're exploring, that's part of it, that it's just who they are. They don't mean anything sexual by it.
Mm-hmm.
I was talking with someone not too long ago. A 5-year-old boy hugged a girl and now he's on a sex registry, a sex offender registry at 5 years
Yeah.
old.
Yeah.
That's ludicrous to me. But the other
Mm-hmm.
side of it is, yeah, there's all these initiatives in the school systems, and you see it, the government pushes. Dads need to talk to boys, moms need to talk to boys about boundaries and all that, but you don't really
Yeah.
see it the other way that much. And the point I want to make with it and get your opinion on is, because you're my kids are in their 30s. I'm
Mm-hmm.
way out of date on this, right?
Yeah.
But seeing the way things are now, and knowing what you know and how compassionate you are, do you fear for your son moving forward in school and potentially facing either a false allegation or he
Yep.
inadvertently does something that he didn't, and his life is ruined? How do you feel about that? And I guess more importantly, what can we do about that?
It scares the absolute hell out of me because I see what some of these young girls are doing, and I see them already bringing up, like, things like, well, I'll just tell everybody that you did this if you don't give me this, and not realizing that that is coercion. And that's where we've got to start looking at society, and as moms we've got to start talking to other moms, because right now, currently in society, we raise our little girls to how they should be treated by a man, what their expectations are, but also that they should be careful around a man, that they shouldn't be alone with a man, that they shouldn't get in a car with a man, all of these things. So we raise our girls to have expectations, and we also raise our girls to have fear of men. We raise our little boys on how to treat a woman,
Hmm.
on how to open a door, that he should pay for a date, that he should, like, we raise our little boys in this manner. We don't, a lot of people aren't raising their little boys to understand what true boundaries are, understand what true consent is, understand how to lay down those boundaries, understand how to look for what could be a dangerous situation, and we're not raising our boys in how to expect to be treated. And that, I think, if we start doing that on both sides, raising these little girls on how they should be treating boys and what they are allowed to expect, because little girls as young as 9 and 10 think that it is okay for them to pinch my little boy's butt at school and to tell him that they're going to hug him and kiss him on the playground, even when he wants absolutely nothing to do with it. He is 10, and a lot of the little boys in his classroom are into the girls. He thinks they're icky, and he doesn't want to date until he has a job.
It's fine. I'm laughing because girls were icky to me till about 12 and a half, give or take.
Yeah.
Ew. I joke about it all the time. In sixth grade, when I was 12 years old, we had to do square dancing, and I had to
Mm-hmm.
touch a girl. But I also noticed that it's younger and younger though. They're more aware of sexuality, I think.
Oh, oh, oh.
I see it in my granddaughter. My oldest granddaughter's 11 years old, and she was down in the summer visiting, and I was having a conversation with her just in general, and I'm like, we didn't go into it, but I kind of got that sense because she's like talking. I'm like, you're 11, you shouldn't be thinking about this already. It's scary to me, actually.
Kids in middle school are getting caught in the restrooms having intimate moments inside of restrooms at school. I mean, it's starting to happen at 11 and 12 and 13 very publicly, and it's very normalized amongst these kids. And that's incredibly, incredibly frightening.
Yeah, they're too young to know better right now. I mean,
Yeah.
that's my viewpoint, and that's not a knock on them. It's just they're not ready. We need to
Hmm.
recognize that. What I'm curious though is, you know, as I see things progressing along, I tend to work with the guys, and the focus of a lot of my material is the guys that are in their 20s, and I use hyperbole. I freely admit it, and I poke the bear. I'm not
Yeah.
afraid to say it's all women. I don't for 1 second believe that, but I do
Hmm.
it to counter the it's all men.
Yeah.
You talked about raising girls to fear men, and what's interesting is I'm starting to see more parents raising boys to fear women, and
Hmm.
I'm actually, I'll take some of the blame on it. I'm pushing that as well as, and I
Yeah.
don't mean it in the sense of fear, but I'm like, guys, if you want to get married, more power to you. I'm not against marriage. I actually think it's a great thing, but you better damn well go in with your eyes wide open, because here's the realities of it.
Hmm.
And I see it, like parents in their 30s, 20s and 30s, more so even the 20-year-old, that they're starting to teach the boys to fear girls. And I, I don't think that's a good thing. What do you think? I don't.
I don't think
Putting
it's a good
fear is
thing.
not a
I,
good
I
thing.
think that's I think we're starting to slowly see the implications of this, of so many, 16, 17 to 25-year-old men that have never been in a relationship, that have never gone on a date, that are leading these very lonely lives, and they're leading it because they were taught this fear.
Hmm.
They were taught the harm, the fact that women can be dangerous, women can falsely accuse, women can do this. And I don't think that's necessarily a good way to teach them, because you can't teach somebody to fear 50% of society without thinking that you're going to have some defined serious impact on their mental health. And ultimately, when we teach fear, fear leads to hate and contempt, and that
Exactly.
eventually leads to
Yeah.
violence. And I believe in teaching young boys and young men to fear women. Eventually, it's going to lead to hate, and eventually it's going to lead to violence, and that becomes very, very scary very quick. And it does scare me. I think the better way to go about it is to teach them what those red flags are, what they need to recognize, how to lay down those boundaries, where and when, and appropriate actions, behaviors, and how to respond in these type of situations so that they don't find themselves in this. And is it a 100% guarantee? No, but the likelihood of it happening is small, and the likelihood of something happening is such a small percentage. But you said this earlier, and I wanted to talk on this. You said you believe that the percentage of these bad women or bad men is a small subset, but they seem to be the loudest voices.
Hmm.
And that really goes back to like sociological theory that leads back to marketers.
Oh,
And there's
absolutely.
tons
Yeah.
and tons of market research studies that show this, that if somebody has a good experience in life, they will tell one person, and it is a close personal friend. If somebody has a bad experience, so we're going to use restaurants as an example. At a restaurant, they'll give them a bad review. They'll post publicly online that they're a terrible place, and they'll probably at the minimum tell 10 people.
Hmm.
So therefore, 30 people, or so therefore by the time they're done, 150 people have heard that this restaurant's bad. But Mary that went there and had a fabulous experience, only one person knows about it. So when you get hundreds of people that go for this one experience, they now equal up to the loudness of the voice of that one person that had a bad experience. And that's why on social media, you'll see a lot of men coming forward and saying, or women coming forward saying, but all I'm seeing are these misogynistic men, or all I'm seeing are these misandristic, toxic women. Well, that's because they're putting it out there times 10 because they've had bad experiences.
Hmm.
But the ones that are good are sitting back quietly because they don't need to speak on it, because they told their closest friend and the only one that matters to them.
Yeah, you brought up, that's a really interesting point that you brought up is, and some of it, I think what you're talking about too is confirmation bias online, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then of
Yeah.
course the algorithms live on
Mm-hmm.
confirmation bias. So, I mean, I get flooded with the angry women because I speak about it, and
Yeah.
I dismiss most of it. Every once in a while though, there's a good one, and I'm like, I got to play off of that. But anyway, a point you just made that I want to explore a little bit, because that's what I love about this. We can just go anywhere. You brought up marketing, and I think
Yeah.
this kind of goes into a subject that I hadn't really thought about talking about with you, but you're like the perfect person to talk about with because you have a young son.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I talk about often is how boys grow up literally from birth being told they're, I use the term lesser, dumb,
Mm-hmm.
the Homer Simpson. There's a whole bunch gamut of examples.
Yep.
My personal belief, and I want to get your opinion on this too, Tammy, is that when it comes to the school unalivings, if I could
Mm-hmm.
probably put it that way and get away with it, I think that the way media in particular, Hollywood, portray boys, this mindset that they're quote unquote inferior in some way, I think has a lot to do with it. As a mother of a young son, do you see your boy, like when he watches me, like you talked about, he's got to go get a job. He's already displaying what
Mm-hmm.
he's supposed to do, right?
Yeah.
He's got to buy flowers. Well, where did he get that idea? He got it from the media, most likely, right? Somehow,
No, he got it from his dad.
or his dad. Okay.
Yeah, he got it from his dad. His dad is, as much as my ex and I had a bad marriage, we could have been in the middle of the biggest fight ever and not even spoken to each other in 2 weeks. But every other Monday, my ex-husband brought me flowers, no matter how many times I told
Aw.
him I was allergic to him.
Oh.
Yeah, but it was also him not listening.
Wait a minute. You were allergic.
Like,
Ah,
okay, okay, great. I'm going to put those in the other room thing.
he's a
So
genius.
his dad is very much a traditional
Okay.
traditional man that believes that I always pay for the first date. I always pay the bill when I take a woman out. I buy her flowers. I do these things. His dad very much has those traditional traditional values. So
He's getting it from
is
him
raising
then.
our child to be like that to women.
So
He has a love and a respect for women as a whole.
good. That's awesome.
So our son is being raised with those values from his father.
Do you see, though, setting that aside, do you see the influence from media, Hollywood? Like you talk about, the girls think it's okay for them to go up and kiss a boy, but he can't do that. And he literally asked you the question.
Mm-hmm.
Do you
I
see that
see it there,
affecting
but
him?
what I see it there, but the other thing that I see, and I have called out mothers at my bus stop. I have called out mothers that I have seen their little girl like at the, pickup line or things like that and call them and then like, seriously, why are you allowing her to wear that? Where there is a shirt of boys are dumb or girls rule, boys drool,
I hate that
boy
shirt.
like
Oh, I
like
hate that
those
shirt.
type of things. And it's like those are completely acceptable to wear on little girls, where you're basically saying girls are better than boys. But if a boy wore a shirt that said boys rule, girls drool, they would probably get sent home from school. I mean, I was appalled when I showed up to the pickup line and there was a girl working, like one of the little girls helping a fifth grader working the pickup line, and she had a shirt that said boys are dumb.
Oh, yeah. See, that's what
But
I'm talking about.
my son has to sit in school all day and read that all day,
And that's got to
across the
affect
table,
him,
this
right?
little girl, and read that he is dumb because he is a boy. And that is completely and totally accepted, not just in the clothes that are made for our little girls, but it is accepted in the language that we see in Disney movies, that we see in other movies, that we see all of these characters that are men that are these bumbling idiots and these fools, and they can't get everything right, and their wives are always having to correct them. It's You see it over and over and over again. Now, in my home, we don't watch any really traditional television
Hmm.
because of that. My kid watches YouTubers and things like that. We very rarely watch it because it's kind of scattered throughout this. Women have the upper hand and men are always making mistakes.
Yeah, it's just interesting because, like you're talking about, right? When you see that boys are stupid, girls rule, boys rule, I despise that shirt because for the exact
Mm-hmm.
reasons, much like the boys are stupid. I
Mm-hmm.
think what happens is that the boys are growing up this way, and it's basically the term othering them. They're lesser.
Mm-hmm.
They're not valued, and then they get to be teenagers. The hormones are kicking in. They get rejected potentially by girls, and they get angry. They get very angry, and
Yep.
they've lost that ability to have compassion for other people because
Mm-hmm.
they're not getting it. And then ultimately, I believe that's what leads to a lot of these school unalivings, right? It's they they've been so ingrained that they don't matter. They can't view other human beings as mattering. And it kind of goes to what we've kind of been talking about, that whole psyche of boys and how we need to change it. And
Mm-hmm.
again, we don't want to take anything away from the girls. I don't want anyone coming back on either one of us saying, well, that we're going to fix the boys, forget the girl. No, we're not saying that. But
No.
it's the exact opposite, actually, because if we can start addressing these issues, for example, your mental health program, which I love, by the way, or the
Mm-hmm.
program you have in your school district,
Mm-hmm.
that will go more to ending school unalivings than anything else. I honestly believe. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, when you grow healthy, well-adjusted boys into healthy, well-adjusted men, women are happier and women are safer. And
Exactly.
that it's as simple as that. So focusing on the issues associated with men have such societal impacts in the safety of women and girls that I think the feminists fail to realize that if they stood back and realized that if we keep these boys from going down this line where they fear a false allegation, where they fear, you know, women, where they're afraid to date, where they all of a sudden become these bitter, angry men that eventually turn into violent men. If we stop that and we address that when they're young, and we start addressing it in young girls and how they're treating men, and how in young or young girls and how they're treating young boys, and in young boys and how they're treating young, we avoid this entire situation. And healthy, well adjusted men make women and society safer.
I couldn't agree with you more, and it kind of leads me where I want to go next, which is you have been quite active, working to try and help someone who is the recipient, if I can be polite about it, of a false allegation. And we're
Yes.
both aware of another situation, and both of us have talked about it, where a young man unalived himself
Hmm.
basically right after a false allegation.
Yep.
And if you don't mind, I want to kind of get into those a little bit,
Uh-huh.
without, I don't want to get too like
Into the
graphic,
nitty gritty details.
not the
Yeah.
graphic of it, but the work
Mhm.
that you're doing with those people and what you're seeing is really what I want to go with it. So, just kind of on the overview, we can start. Well, the two of them, Inquisitor is one of them for those that might
Yeah.
not know, and the other is Good Time Charlie. I
Yeah.
don't care which one you want to start with. Can you kind of just give the background on either one of them, and we'll go from there?
So the Inquisitor situation, I mean, I saw from the outside. I was already actively involved in with the Good Time Charlie situation. And if people don't know, just very loosely, his ex-girlfriend, who has a 900,000 follower TikTok account, publicly accused him of having inappropriate conversations and exchanging child pornography photographs with a 15-year-old girl. She did it publicly, but she also did it to the police. So he was essentially run off the app. So I was already talking about these false allegations because the police investigated and found that not only was it that they didn't have the evidence, that the evidence of all of these messages were linked back to her IP address. And it is believed that she created this evidence. And the police have come forward and given a statement that he is 100% innocent. As we were talking about this Good Time Charlie situation, the thing with Inquisitor happened,
Mm-hmm.
which is what is he, a 23-year-old young man that was accused of having inappropriate conversations with a minor, a 17-year-old. And they destroyed him across the internet, even though that minor told him she was not a minor. And also, the messages show that he never did anything inappropriate. It was all fabricated, it was all a lie. It was put across multiple accounts. And that young man saw no life forward and took his life on a live on TikTok one night
Yeah, I mean that was
because of that false allegation. And
right.
I can tell you, I've had many conversations, and there's a section of the interview that I had done with Good Time Charlie to help him get his story out, where he very specifically says, he came into this as a 40-year-old man with us having been through a lot in his life with a certain set of skills. And although he never wanted to be an advocate or a face for false allegations, if he could do anything, he would prefer that it were Inquisitor sitting there telling his story as opposed to him. He's like, but I had a certain set of skills. And I can tell you that throughout the last 6 or 9 months that Charlie has been run through this online, he has been very close to not being here the next day. And I can tell you that some days he has good days, but even now he will send me messages that I am very concerned for his mental health on a daily basis. And that's why I continue to stay loud, because his allegations were made on a 900,000 follower account. And I get hate on a daily basis for speaking out. People sending me messages telling
Mm-hmm.
me, how can I support a predator? Like, this is what you men's rights people do. You support predators. He's dangerous. And I'm like, do you realize that there's an actual formal statement from a police sheriff saying that he is innocent and that there is no link to any of this to him? He has done nothing wrong. But people don't want to hear that. They want to believe that she's the victim that she painted her story to be. And what's baffling to me is that people still want to believe that and believe that she's this good, sweet, innocent victim when she's sitting in jail in West Virginia because she broke the sprinkler system in a hospital and destroyed 6 floors of a hospital, flooded it.
Hmm.
And the hospital 6 weeks later is at a half capacity. They would not give her bail, and she's up for felony destruction of property charges and sitting in jail in West Virginia. And the Missouri County prosecutor is working on subpoenas to get the last bit of evidence to press charges for false allegation, malicious intent, invasion of privacy, and assault in the state of Missouri for what she has done to Charlie.
And
But
what's
yet people are still supporting her.
right, and what's amazing about it, to the best of my knowledge to date, The people that did what they did to Inquisitor have not faced any legal ramifications. And it kind of speaks to where I want to kind of go with this, because I've had guys on my podcast before who have gone through this and been completely exonerated, 100%. One of whom carries a paper around with him because he gets accosted in public still, because of that belief. Well, yeah, you got let go, but you're still guilty. And I'm sure Charlie's dealing with that. Inquisitor will never know, but I guarantee you he was dealing with that. When you're working with Charlie and Inquisitor types or all of these, I'm not a registered therapist. I don't believe you are. We're
No.
just trying to help them out
Yeah.
and get them to help. What do you see as the biggest struggle for them? Like when you're talking to them, is there any particular, because there are things that I hear repeatedly and I'm like, okay, well, we got to get you to a therapist. This is beyond my ability. But is there, what are you hearing from them?
One, finding a therapist and finding a good therapist.
That's very difficult.
In Charlie's particular situation, he is not in therapy now because his therapist thought he was making this all up and that it was all in his head, and basically was putting him on antipsychotics and all of this stuff as if this was not real. His own therapist didn't believe that this was happening to him. So he's kind of turned off of therapy. The biggest thing is they feel silenced. They feel like there's no future, like this is the rest of their life. And no matter what they do, it does not matter that he's got this innocent moniker, not just a closed police report, but he's actually got a statement. I mean, the sheriff coming forward in this statement saying he's innocent. There's still always going to be someone that didn't see that didn't believe it. So there's that. This will follow him the rest of his life. And so you see that, and you see the mental health toll, but not just on them, but on everybody around them. Like his family kind of saying, you need to let this go. You need to just move on. You need to stop talking about it. And he's like, I'm not going to stop talking about it until every last person online knows that I didn't do the things that they said I did. Because he still gets those comments. And I get messages daily from people saying, you're supporting a predator, right? So I think it's like, it breaks down not men, just their mental health, but it breaks down their relationships with those closest to them that don't really understand what it truly feels like to be in their shoes and can't understand why they can't just let it go. Because there is no just letting go an allegation of P3DO, because that will follow him. And somebody will come up in 5 years or 10 years and say, aren't you the dude that did?
Well, yeah.
And so
that's what happens to these guys.
I can tell you he's tired.
Oh, he's got to be exhausted. Yeah.
Yeah. He has good days. He has good days and he has bad days. And he's very fortunate to have a good support system around him. And I told Charlie I never questioned. I watched his story for probably a month unfolding online and really investigated his content and everybody around him before I decided to make a video. And the moment I made that video, that man came to me and said, I want to talk to you privately. And he was not like, thank you for putting my word out. He's been screaming at the rooftops to be heard. His concern was not for him. His concern was not for clearing his name. His concern was what they would do to my accounts and what they would do to me if they came after me for speaking up for him. And that maybe I didn't want to get involved. And did I know what she was capable of? And did I know that she was going to use her 900,000 follower account to potentially destroy me? And I'm like, oh, you can't put me through anything I haven't already been through because of what I speak about, but I appreciate your concern. But one of the things that was very key in our first initial conversation is that I said to him, I'm like, I need you to stand back for a second and realize something. I need you to know that you are a victim. And when I said that to him, he almost lost it. Because I don't think up until then he'd been fighting to clear his name, and it never really sunk in that he was a victim. And I'm like, you most certainly are a victim of being like, you have been through, this is something traumatic, and you need to realize that sometimes I'm stepping in here to advocate for you. You need to step back a little bit and let me fight some of the fight for you so you can take time to heal from this trauma. I'm like, so like, send me these people that are giving you problems. I'll have these conversations with you. are with them.
Mhm.
I will speak up for you because that's what an advocate does. That's where we step in. My job is to help you and everybody around you get this out here, but to make sure that you're protected because I would much rather have them hate on me than on them. And he's one of the people involved said, but how do you handle that? I said, because it's a lot easier to fight the fight when you're not emotionally
I
dealing
was
with the
just gonna
ramifications of the
I
fight.
was just gonna say that exact thing is you can
Mm-hmm.
step back from it. It's you're not in it per se.
Yeah.
You're able to step back, and it's funny. You just hit the nail on the head. The biggest issue that I see when I work with guys that are dealing with false allegations, and I'm in the middle of writing a book about this too. But the number one issue I think far and away is not just them, but society doesn't see them as victims, and they are
Yeah.
indeed victims. Charlie will deal with this for the rest of his life.
Mm-hmm.
Inquisitor did deal with it for the rest of his life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the guys that I work with, there are some that have been cleared 20 and 30 years ago and still deal with it.
Yep.
One in particular, if he can't get a job because what HR departments do, if they get a resume they like, the first thing they do is Google you, right?
Yep.
The first thing that comes up for them is his arrest. Even though he's completely
Mm-hmm.
exonerated, nowhere does it show he was. And that's where I
Yeah.
think both of us can we're trying to raise awareness of this because
Mm-hmm.
these guys are victims and they are
Yeah.
every bit as destroyed as if the other person, that alleged it
Mm-hmm.
was indeed the victim.
Yeah.
And trying to get society to see that. You talked about yourself. When you talk about it, we get the hate, right? Which I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with it. I know you don't.
I don't care.
But it's how do you think we move forward in getting this addressed? Because society does not want to hear it, at least not my opinion, that
No,
these
they
guys
don't.
are victims. How do we get, other than what you and I are doing, but how in general can we get, even politicians don't want to hear it. How do we get that
So
moving forward?
I think we need more people like Sheriff Scott Childers from Ray County. So we had our interview about Good Time Charlie and what happened. And part of that interview, we were kind of talking about the impact of false allegations on other victims, victims being believed, the pull on resources, the effects of false allegations. And we're going to come back and have another interview because, as a sheriff, he recognizes how harmful these false allegations are, how they aren't taken seriously, why they need to be taken seriously. And one of his big things is the impact on other victims. He's like, there were valid victims. He's like, we were hardly going through and investigating and put a lot of effort into investigating Charlie because this was a child sexual assault type of charge, and that is very serious. And he's like, and all of that resource could have gone to
Mm-hmm.
investigating this man that domestically abused somebody, this murder case that was going on that got put to the wayside because of this. And he's like, but also the impact of, and he's like, and he's like, and I'll be honest, it took Charlie coming in here and saying, you don't understand, you need to do something. Like, I'm getting like, and showing his phone and showing the on a live threats that were coming in and everything for them to really understand. And now he sees it, and he said that he was willing to lose his next reelection over speaking up on this. So I intend to do another interview that I'm going to put out on YouTube with him about this. But I think it's finding those type of people that are kind of, the diamond in the rough that sit in these somewhat political positions that are actually willing to speak up on it and willing to come to the table and willing to recognize it and say, this is a problem. Because until it happens, we don't see it. But I also think right now we're at a really pivotal point in this because the internet, and particularly on TikTok, but all across the internet, is all up in arms over what happened to Inquisitor. Hundreds of thousands of people
Mm-hmm.
were affected by this. And raising the voices of other men falsely accused right now, and not just that they were falsely accused, but getting their stories out. That's why I took the time to do a 2.5 hour interview with Charlie, so people could just really see the man behind this, see the emotion behind this, see what his mental health was like. Because the more we raise up these men's voices right now, while this wound of losing a young man's life is so fresh, the more people are listening. And I think that's kind of our path forward is you don't ever want somebody's death to be used for a purpose. But Inquisitor serves a huge lesson that needs to be learned by so many, that these are not jokes, that men are taking their lives because of these, and we need to start taking them more seriously.
Yeah, it's an interesting point you just made. Is most people don't realize somewhere, I don't know the exact number, but it's somewhere around 40% of men who unalive themselves are either directly or indirectly due to a false allegation. Now, it may
Mhm.
not be P3. It could be they
Yeah.
go to family court and the wife says, well, he abused the kids or he abused me. And they get
Hmm.
ramrodded there and then they unalive themselves. It's a huge problem. Like you, I don't ever want to use the death of someone as a benefit, but if we
Mm-mm.
can say some good came out of it, just trying to put a bow on it, I guess, or something like that. I've seen a change, right? Right around
Hmm.
when that was happening, the Russell Brand thing happened. And I was very
Yep.
vocal about that. I don't give two craps about Russell Brand. I, to this day, don't know if he's guilty or innocent. And if he's guilty, I will be the first to slam him. My
Yep.
whole argument was he is innocent until proven guilty. We're
Hmm.
now almost 2 months later. It's disappeared in the story. You don't hear about it at all,
Yep.
which kind of is indicating to me that this investigation is not finding what they thought they were going to find. We don't know yet,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
it speaks to the overall thing, which is these guys are presumed guilty immediately. Charlie was presumed
Yes.
guilty. He got lucky, right? He had a police department that was willing to listen to him. What most people don't realize is the majority of the time they do not listen to them. They just
Yeah.
assume they're guilty.
He got lucky, and he was smart.
Well, he went in.
When she put these false allegations out online, he went radio silent.
Mm-hmm.
He shut down all of his social media. He walked away and he let people talk. And he didn't try to fight it until he came back with that police report in his hands. And the police were not actually investigating to clear Charlie's innocence. They were investigating to charge him.
Absolutely.
They were, and in the process of trying to charge them, when they got the messages from Charlie's account, his Instagram account, that were exchanged with this young girl's account. Both of these accounts were logged into at the same IP address as Stacia's account. And at the same time, Charlie was not logged into that account in Missouri.
States apart, right? If I remember right.
He was in Missouri and she was in Moundsville, West Virginia.
Right. So that's
And
that's not a
so,
hop, skip, and a jumping away.
yeah, it's not, yeah.
There's like no
So, and the
realistic
other thing
thing he
is
was
this
there.
account was created long enough to exchange these messages with Charlie, and then long enough to exchange them with Stacia, and then deleted.
Right.
So it was an account created for a purpose, to have a conversation with Charlie, and then send the screenshots to her.
And it speaks to the level that sometimes these people will go to, right?
Oh yeah.
And when you think about it, obviously she's got some issues. I'll be polite
She's
and
got some significant mental health
mental health
issues. I
issues,
do
right?
believe the best thing that could happen to her I mean, I want her to pay the price for what she's done, but with the hospital damage and the destruction of property, which is in essence of over $2 million worth of damage
Mm-hmm.
right now. And they don't know the extent of it because they're at half capacity. You've got a hospital in a small area of West Virginia at half capacity because of what she's done. So they don't have the full extent. Then you tag on the charges that are going to come because of what Charlie's done. And she could get years and years in prison. But I believe what she really needs is a full scale psychological evaluation where she is then sent to a mental health institution, because sending her to jail, she's going to come out and do this again.
Yeah.
She does need psychological help. And I've had people come say, so you're basically destroying the reputation of a woman that's mentally ill. Just because she's mentally unhinged or mentally struggling does not excuse the fact that she destroyed a man's life, and there's culpability in what she did. And I don't believe everything that she did was because of her mental health struggles. I believe that she has mental health struggles, but I also believe that she is very sane, lucid, manipulative, planned, and well thought out actions in what she's doing, because Charlie is not the only person that she falsely accused in this.
Yeah.
When she went to get mental health help in West Virginia, she moved in, um, Charlie did not want her coming back to the farm because he wanted her to stay in West Virginia where the mental health resources were for a few more weeks to get help. In that few weeks is when she started the stories that he was being abusive online before she brought the child sexual assault stuff forward. But ultimately, she moved in with another TikToker that she had been friends with for years. She also falsely accused that woman's husband of abusing their children and family dog and launched a full CPS investigation against that family. And CPS found that he had done nothing wrong. And she was there as his wife going, he's not abusing my children. I live with them.
You know what's interesting about what you're talking about, Tammy, is that that pattern of behavior is very common with people that make false allegations. And it, it it begs the question to me of, are we turning blinders? Do we have blinders on to not see that women are doing it? And I'm not trying to blame women
Yeah.
here, but it's predominantly women making the false allegation.
But she also previously destroyed her ex-husband's reputation. They did joint content on TikTok and they were both in that kind of haunted space. They did haunted dog content and stuff. When they divorced, she destroyed his reputation and she very publicly said he was abusive and all kinds of horrible stuff about him that destroyed his reputation to the point that he couldn't fight her huge account on social media and pretty much left social media.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is, I mean, he was never charged with anything. There were never any police claims. Did anything ever happen there? Because I don't believe, like, I don't ever want to be the person that doesn't believe the victim. But when she's saying she's the victim, I don't believe that anything ever happened.
Well, that's
Because
the
that's
point I
three
make.
times in a
Yeah.
row. Like, I mean, you already have done it twice. Why would I believe? And the funny thing about it is so she accused the ex-husband of abusing their animals. She accused Charlie of abusing her animals. And then she accused Ancient Queen's husband of abusing animals.
Mm-hmm.
They're
It's
all the same type of
it's the
allegations.
same pattern over and over and over again, and it's,
Yeah.
to a couple of the points that you made is there are multiple people, cities, towns being affected by this, right? The hospital can't take care of patients. Charlie's going through what he was going through. The police department, sheriff, they're spending hours investigating this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny when you were talking about that a little while ago, I do a radio show on the side, which we interview people. And we were interviewing someone from the SV unit a couple of months back, Special Victims Unit. And I brought this up off air. They would not talk about it on air. This is how, I mean, they did not want to talk about it. But I had a conversation off air and I'm like, what are you seeing? And they threw some numbers at me that pretty high, 50-60% of what they see, they know are false allegations. And I'm like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what do you have to do in it? You know, right off the bat, your job is still to investigate it. Absolutely it is, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
said, how much time? And this is where it kind of what jogged my memory of that is when you said they were spending hours and hours on this. And they said to me, it takes away from our ability to work with people we know are the victims.
Yep.
And that's where I guess the next point I want to make or get you to talk about is we don't want to take away from actual victims at all.
No.
But the other side of it is we need to protect the innocent as well. What's your
Mm-hmm.
solution? I struggle with this, Tammy. I have to be honest with you. As a victim myself who wasn't believed, I would never want someone to go through that. The other side of it, though, is I don't want someone ever to get accused when they didn't do anything wrong.
I think it's a really, I mean, I don't think there's an answer because if you really do live in the we believe victims, well then a person that is falsely accused is the victim of a smear
Exactly.
campaign, is
Yep.
the victim, like they are a victim and it is extremely traumatic. So if we're in that we believe victims, then we need to hear their story as a victim of what they're going through. And so I don't think there's a easy answer. I think the biggest thing that we need to start teaching people and that society needs to hear is that when there is an allegation made against a human being, don't jump on that allegation
Mm-hmm.
and start spreading it.
Yep.
Like, because you could be the person that then becomes, because that's exactly what happened. Keegan and Tito, when it came to, or Keegan's mask and Tito, when it came to the Inquisitor, they listened to AJ. They listened to what she said happened and they took it public and they accused this young man of these inappropriate messages with a 17-year-old. There was once they saw the evidence, they know there was no proof that it ever happened and nothing was inappropriate. But they didn't take the time to see the evidence. They didn't take the time to verify that the evidence was even correct. And that was one of the things with the Stacia Weird Good Time Charlie situation is her evidence looks really bad.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the message exchange between this young girl and Charlie looks real, and it looks like it really happened, and it looks really bad. But people need to learn that they shouldn't jump on, because what happened in this situation is the IP address is trailed back to her, which means she created it to make him a pedophile so that she could get the attention of being his victim.
And see, you're going through the same struggle I do, right? There is no answer at this point, but I think your solution is the one that I offer up too, which is, and it was what I talked about with the Russell Brand situation and why I was so vocal about it is we don't know. Step back, let it play out. Trevor Bauer, that situation came out. He's the baseball player that was just vilified online.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out he is 100% innocent.
Yep.
Now, in his case, he lost a couple $100 million. I don't even care about that. Nor does he, by the way, because he's done videos on it. It's his reputation. Now, he had the millions of dollars to fight back. Russell Brand has millions of dollars to fight back and try and clear themselves. I'm not a big fan of Kevin Spacey, but he got cleared. Again, they're rich people. They can get out of it. The average guy, the Inquisitor, the Good Time Charlie, me, the guys we don't have that ability. And that's what leads to what Inquisitor did.
Well, and so like with Charlie's situation, like she'll get charged probably by the Missouri police eventually, but he would like to seek like defamation and charges against her to further this and get legal justice, because I mean, his livelihood's been affected, his mental health has been affected. He has received just an onslaught, an insane amount of death threats. They made a hoax that his girlfriend died. I mean, it has gone so far and so deep. But there are people that are out there saying, well, so what you're saying by putting this GoFundMe up to get legal justice is you got yourself into this situation, and you want other people to pay to get you out. What situation did he get himself into? He allowed a woman that he thought was going through a divorce with an abusive man that was kicking him out of his home and about to be homeless to move into his family farm, where she was supposed to pay a small amount of rent and help clean the house while she recovered. He thought he was helping her in her abuse recovery, but now he's the bad guy. But there are a lot of people saying, why should we help you? Because he doesn't have $1 million to go fight a defamation suit. Best case scenario, you're looking at $25,000 to $75,000, and that's if you get really lucky and it goes pretty quick.
He'd be really lucky to get it for that low. You're talking six figures.
I have friends that are more than $140,000 into fighting a defamation suit.
Yeah. I mean, I talked with one not too long ago, $500,000 in debt, and completely exonerated. He's going to sue, but the reality is he's never going to get that money back, because the people that are doing it generally aren't, Amber Heard, to use another example, right?
Yeah.
They don't have $10 million that the court can award. It's sad, because, and I want to wrap a bow on this with just get this thought from you is, do you think some of it, and I don't know the answer to this, do you think some of it is because of the way we're raising girls now, that they think they can do this? And because it's happening more and more. You even talked about it with your son, right? Where the girl on the playground thinks she can do it and get away with it. Is it a result of the way parents are raising the girls, or society, whatever term you want to use, or what's causing it, I guess?
So I think there's some, potentially some could be the way some parents are raising girls. But what we see a lot of times is these false allegations and things like that, like it's usually situations where they've escalated over time. And all it takes is for a woman to come forward online, on social media, on somewhere else, and say she's a victim. And she gets so much attention. And so many people want to help her, and so many people want to lift her up. Well, guess what? The next time it's a bigger story. The next time it's a little worse. I think that's more what they're seeing. I think we're seeing these false allegations coming forward because they're realizing they can become a martyr for the feminist movement. They can become a martyr for victims as they're so strong to come forward and tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
And there are innocent men that lives are being destroyed because of it. And because of this whole Me Too and believe all women, they're just automatically believed, and who cares what happens to his life.
That's a very interesting take that you have there. It's very similar to something that I point out often, which is you'll hear divorced moms, single moms, oh, I have it so tough, blah, blah. They're looking for that dopamine hit of all the likes and comments and all that online. And I often say to them, well, let's hear the other side of the story. We never hear the other side because guys don't do that. There are some that do. And it's an interesting point you make there. You got me thinking a little bit because I call it the dopamine hit, right? They're looking for that attention. That's a tough one for us to get past, right? Because social media is not going away, right? And, I'm trying to think long-term, how do we resolve this somehow? That's going to be one, because the social media companies love this stuff, right? Wow.
Well, and I think that's again where we have to keep stories, like, as you said, you don't want to use somebody's death as a reason and use them as a poster child but that's why we have to keep stories like Inquisitor's story and other men's stories that have been falsely accused, that have taken their lives. That's why we have to keep them so public and so much in the forefront, as a reminder that we cannot just assume a man is innocent until we get the evidence, assume a man is guilty until we know for sure, because you could push him to be this man. Are you prepared to stand on your pedestal and take responsibility for pushing a man to take his life? And I think if we keep doing that, I think that helps, because I think there's a lot of people standing back and going, whoa, crap. Yeah. There's a lot of people with this Charlie situation that are coming forward and making apologies and like, oh my gosh, I didn't know what. And there are still some people basically like being complete and total, still, she's in jail. And the police, not just an innocent police report, but a sheriff's statement saying he's innocent, that are still supporting her.
Yeah, it's interesting because I when I did my stuff on the Russell Brand, and I did a whole thing on false allegations in May. Of course, I got the blowback, right? But I don't know the number, but if I were to put a number on it, I would say for every one piece of negative feedback I got, I probably got somewhere around 7, 8, 9, maybe even 10 positive, like, wow, I didn't think about that, or, I jumped to the conclusion and all that. And I'm sure I know you get the negative, but I'm sure you're getting the positive as well. Well, you've mentioned that. Maybe that is the way forward, because again, we don't want to take away from an actual victim at all, but we don't want to victimize someone else. And the bottom line is, let it play out. For example, people are believing the Russell Brand phone text. My answer is, I could make that phone image in about 10 seconds on Canva. You wouldn't even know it wasn't real. The police have to do their forensic, which is what you talked about with Charlie, where they can get the IP and all that. I'm ex-IT. I know all that stuff. I know what they do. Yeah. That's what we need to do, is step back. Don't believe everything on its face. I think, for lack of a better term, that's the Me Too movement created this, because just believe them no matter what. And unfortunately, the negative.
But they also made being a victim the cool in thing to do with the Me Too movement. It was like every woman was coming forward with her story. And if you didn't have a story, you were odd woman out. So you had to create a story.
But the negative to that is now actual victims are not getting belief. So the Me Too movement is actually backfiring, which is not any better. It makes me sad to see that, to be honest with you. It's again, I'm a victim that was not believed, so I get it. I know of many women, same scenario, and there's no, like we both talked about, there's no real fix to this other than to just keep trying to talk about it and get conversation going. As we're allowed to, because unfortunately we've both faced a lot of blowback from the social medias for talking about it too. Tammy, we only got about 5 minutes left, so I wanted to give you the opportunity, because I want people to follow you. I follow, I think, every account you have. Sometimes there's a few new ones, and then I'm like, oh crap, I didn't have that one, and then one disappears and comes back. And I will, of course, put in the show notes links to all of them. But how can people follow you on the various social medias, or if they wanted to contact you, that type of stuff?
So you can find me on Instagram, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook as the Manicured Mom. On TikTok, I have multiple accounts. I have the Manicured Mom, I have Moms for Men, and I have Stop Silencing Men. Those are all three accounts, and I posted similar content on all of them. And then the only other content I have outside of that is I do have my own website where I write a blog, and my website's themanicuredmom.com.
Tammy, I want to say thank you so much. As I said, I was keeping you in the back, ready for the right moment to bring you
Thanks
on.
for having me on.
Any final thought that you want to offer to the audience?
I mean, I would just say to men that every time you think that men's voices aren't being heard and men are being silenced, realize that we've talked about this earlier in the show, it is the toxic small subset of women out there that are doing that. And there are more good women in this world than there are bad women. And there are more good men in this world than there are bad men. So don't let the toxic voices overrun your mind and turn you into a hateful person that you aren't today.
Amen to that. All right. On that note, I do want to say thank you for coming on, and I encourage everyone, go follow her. Sometimes she's got some serious stuff, like some of the stuff we talked about today. She's also got some pretty funny stuff from time to time too. One thing I love that you do now is you make their little logos for people.
Oh yeah, everybody gets their own logo. Get on my bad side, you're getting your own logo.
With that. When I see a new one every time, I'm like, oh, she did not go. But thank you for coming on. I truly appreciate it.
I did send an ex-patriarch logo off to a couple people.
Oh boy, you're going to get in trouble with that one. All right, Tammy, thanks again for coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. This was an awesome show. As I said, make sure you go follow Tammy. I followed her somewhere in the neighborhood of 3.5 years. I've lost track of time through God knows how many accounts at this point. But what she has to say is what I want people to hear also, right? One thing I think you should take away from this is that what Tammy had to say, what I had to say, were very similar, right? We're in agreement on not everything, but most things. And to what one final point that she put out there is, don't let the minority control your thoughts. Let the majority control your thoughts, even though they're a little bit more silent than the minority. The truth of the matter is, and I'll echo what she said, the majority of people, men and women, are good. And that's something that we need to keep in mind. Doesn't mean we aren't aware of what's going on. We should have our eyes open on all things. But understand deep down that we, in general, are very good and good for each other. Both men and women benefit when both sides come together, and there's no disputing that. So that's my final little thought on it. If you've gotten this far, you got to give me that like. Go hit it right now. Now. Stop. Go do it. All right? And make sure you subscribe. Podcast comes out every Sunday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And one other final quick note, I am live on TikTok, YouTube, Instagram. I forget after a while. I'm trying to get a couple others going every Wednesday from 4 to 5:30. And sometimes we have a specific topic that we talk about. Other times it's a free-for-all. They're a lot of fun. Sometimes it's not so fun, but in general, 95% of the time we have a blast with it. And it's a chance where you can talk to me, ask me questions. The best question I got the other day is, do you shave your head? The answer is yes. But I'm an open book, as though Tammy is too. Come join me on the live, and if you want to chit-chat, we'll get to know one another. All right, on that note, I'm going to wrap things up, and we'll see you next time on Men Need to Be Heard.